We are live. All right. Hello, everyone who is joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this YouTube live session. I'm seeing the number creep up, which is a great sign, and we're really honored to have you with us here tonight. Before we get started on our introductions, I'm going to just briefly do an overview of what tonight will look like for all of us. So we are going to hear our intros from our awesome alumni representing our 3 campuses in Spain, Italy, and France. This is just a quick note that we do not focus on the summer program in this webinar. We really do focus on the year-long and semester SYA experience, and that's what our alumni here did. So if you're interested in the summer program, you're welcome to listen in, but I would encourage you to check out our website if that's the only program you're interested in. So we will be focusing on our school year abroad academic programming tonight. So we will do our introductions. I will give a brief admissions presentation, which is an overview for all 3 countries. And then we will have our panel with our alumni talking about classes and host families and everything in between. And then we will open it to questions from the audience. So sometimes we get some pre-submitted questions, but you are more than welcome to use the comment feature to submit questions as we go along. And then we will kind of jump around with our alumni at the end for those questions, for some time for that. But again, thank you so much for joining. We are going to jump right in. My name is Maggie Bland, and I am an admissions team member at SYA. This is our final YouTube live information session, so thank you all for coming. And we are approaching our deadline for our applications, which is February 9th. So this is a great time over winter break to be working and submitting your application. So we're really excited to read those, and we're getting into crunch time. So thank you so much for taking the time to learn more. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our intros from our alumni who may speak in the target language a little bit for us. I see Georgia laughing. So we will start with Georgia, then we'll go to Francesca, and then Julie.
Hola, soy Georgia. Tuve un gran tiempo en Zaragoza, España, y soy de San Francisco, y voy a San Francisco University High School. Hi, I'm Georgia. I studied abroad for a year in Zaragoza, Spain. I had a wonderful time, and I'm super excited to talk about it. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I go to San Francisco University High School.
Thank you, Georgia. Francesca?
Buonasera a tutti, mi chiamo Francesca e io sono andata in Italia e sono di New York. Hi everyone, I am Francesca. I went to Italy last year and I am from New York.
Awesome. And Francesca, where do you go to school?
I go to the Hewitt School.
Hewitt. Awesome. Thank you. Over to Julie.
Salut, je m'appelle Julie. J'étais en France pour le premier semestre l'année dernière à Rennes. Mais maintenant, j'habite à New York et je suis une élève à School of the Holy Child Rye. So hi, my name's Julie. I was a fall semester student last year in France, and right now I live in New York and I go to School of the Holy Child.
Thank you all. We're so excited to have you here. I'm really excited to hear from all of you. I know I've met some of you on the road and heard about your amazing presentations with our admissions folks. So thank you for all of your hard work and for dedicating your time to SYA. We are going to pull our alumni off of our screen just for a second as we transition to our admissions presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will go through that presentation, and then we will have time for our panel. So again, thank you everyone for joining us for our school year abroad admissions information session tonight. So we hope that you can picture yourself here, traveling through your new host country, learning a language through conversations with locals, and living with a host family. So if these things excite you, it is time to start your application. With campuses in France, Italy, and Spain, SYA is here to turn your learning journey into one that is focused on hands-on and real-world experiences at our 3 campuses.
Every experience.
I'm just going to jump over this. If you'd like to see the video, it's on our website. It's great. But just for time's sake, I'm going to jump through that and go over all the details before we turn it over to our alumni. So basically at SYA, all of our students live with their own personally matched host families as they immerse themselves in the local culture and find a home abroad. So a common question I get on the road all the time is, where will I actually go to school? And the answer is on our SYA campuses. So SYA is a school with 3 different locations. So each campus has between 45 and 65 students coming from high schools all across the United States. So we create these small communities on our campuses, and it can be an amazing community to make new friends, have new teachers, and really immerse yourself in the local culture as well. So we do have a 2-year or level 2 language requirement on our France and Spain campuses. So that means for students, you have to be in level 2 or above of the language, or have tested out of those languages. And for our Italy program, you do not need any Italian experience. You just need an experience taking a new language. So I know that may sound intimidating, and the immersion concept can be intimidating to our students. And I want to assure you that a wide variety of language learners excel at SYA due to the fully immersive curriculum. So in Spain and France, 4 of your 6 classes are taught in the target language. But again, you're learning alongside people who are learning the language with you. And those courses in the language are leveled as well. So as part of our fieldwork curriculum, you'll spend about 1 day a week getting outside of the classroom and learning from the culture around you. So whether that's interviewing locals for political science, presenting research, or studying art history at local museums, you're really taking ownership of your learning and seeing what you learn in the classroom come to life. So you will grow more independent through our school organized trips led by SYA faculty members, and you will get opportunities to, again, split up in small groups and travel throughout your host country to some of these places that you're seeing on the maps right now. This is a great opportunity to really push yourself in the language skills and also get to know a smaller group of students at SYA. So we do have a final project at SYA, which our semester students and our full year students, we do have fall and spring semesters, and then also a full year program, though most of our students do attend for the full year. And all of our students at some point participate in the capstone project, which is really where students can dive into a subject that's interesting to them and then present their findings to their class. So often this involves local interviews and getting out into the community to really dive into a subject that's interesting to you. So all of our students do at least 2 activities while they're with us. So that can be taking a cooking class or an art class, continuing to play a sport, or anything in between, participating in a local orchestra as well. So I'll be excited to hear from our alumni about what they did for their activities. But it's a great opportunity to really get to know local high school students as well. And each of our campuses has their own high school exchange program with a local school. So that's another opportunity that students can make those local connections. So our faculty are comprised of both American and local faculty members. Because we are an accredited U.S. high school, courses such as math and English will be taught in English. And then the other courses will be taught mostly in the target language. In Spain and France, it's basically all in the target language. And then in Italy, it kind of wades into Italian throughout the year. So that's 2 language classes, which are leveled, and then 2 elective classes. So colleges really love SYA. It can be a great thing for college admissions folks to see on an application. It says a lot about our students and the grit and ambition it takes to live in a new country and learn a new language. And it can really distinguish their applications. But the really important part is that SYA students find their voices overseas. So that kind of independence and confidence that our students bring to college and university campuses is really incredible. And we hear from admissions folks that it can be a wonderful sign of the students' readiness for college. We also do have college liaisons on each campus. So that means that we have a point person on our campuses that will help juniors start the process and seniors complete the application process. So about half of our families receive financial aid. We have over $2 million in financial aid at SYA, which makes a big difference for a small program. The application deadline is also February 9th. So if you're interested in that, please do apply. We really strongly encourage anyone interested to apply for FA. So in conclusion, we really think that it's time to do something different in your high school years and explore the world around you and make an incredible place like Rennes, France, pictured here, or Viterbo, Italy, or Saragossa, Spain, your home. So you do not need to scan this QR code, but this is just a final note to encourage you to follow us on social media because our campus reporters in each location are creating amazing content and posting our campuses and kind of a day in the life basically on our campuses through our social media channels. So that's kind of a general overview. Again, we're open to rising sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and we offer fall, spring, and full year semesters. And we can talk individually if you're interested in one of those or if you're still deciding. So if we could just take a second to transition to our alumni panel, we're going to bring back our alumni, and we are just going to dive right into our Q&A. I know some questions are coming in as well, and we will have time for that at the end. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to talk a little bit about your favorite class.
Okay. I have two favorite classes, if that's allowed.
Of course.
My favorite classes were actually my elective classes. So you have your main classes, but then typically you choose, I think, 2 elective classes in every campus. And I had environmental science and political science, and both of them, while they were in French, they were still very understandable to pretty much everyone. And we did a lot of exchange with the community. So in political science, we were learning a lot about current events and things that were going on where we were living, as well as with environmental science. We made des posters cartonnaires, which is like these like in sorry, I'm just trying to speak French. These recordings of the environment around where we are, and we measured the weather and all kinds of things that really take you deeper into the place you are. So I really loved my electives.
That's awesome. So yeah, so Julie was talking about 2 electives. In other campuses, some of those include a cinema class, environmental science, art history. So all of those can be found on our course catalog online. And each campus has a little bit of a difference in what elective courses they offer, and students do get to choose those classes. So thank you, Julie, for talking about those. Georgia, would you like to add in?
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to say that this is like going to come up later, but something that made me want to apply to SYA was that I knew that in Spain they have a really awesome art history class, and I'm super interested in art history. And I think that something that's unique about the SYA experience is that you actually get to see a lot of the art in person. And so in my sophomore year, I had taken like a pretty general art history class, and then when I was in Spain, I got to focus more on Spanish artists. Also, Soleil, who's the art history teacher in Spain, is just a wonderful teacher. Like, she really knows what she's doing. And I think that like kind of makes SYA stand out in many ways too, but just that like you can see the art in person. So my class took a field trip to Madrid, and we got to spend the day like wandering the Prado Museum, which was really awesome. And then later on in the year too, we went to the Dali Museum, which is like really crazy. But I would just say, yeah, that it's definitely like very unique that at SYA you get to like see a lot of the stuff in person because you're so immersed in it.
That's great. It's such an invaluable experience to see what you're learning in the classroom for yourself in person later in the day, especially for a class like art history. That sounds amazing. All right. So for our activities, so I know we got a question about, how do you maybe connect with the local culture or learn the language when you are going to school with a lot of students from the US? And I think our activities are a great way to dive into local culture. So maybe I think all of you can touch on maybe an activity that you did. So we'll go Francesca, Georgia, and then Julie.
Sure. So some extracurriculars that I did, basically every campus has an extracurricular coordinator who will basically, you can talk to them about your interests, and they will let you know if there are any programs in the area that you can participate in. And spoiler alert, there are always. But so some of the ones that I participated in is I volunteered at a local after school program for children, and I was basically tutoring them, playing games with them. So that was a great way to improve my Italian skills. I think also just trying to explain English in Italian is it was a very unique experience, but it was very valuable. I also did ceramics and fashion design. So I really love arts. I really love visual arts. So that was a great way for me to also meet other people in Italy as well.
Awesome. How about you, Georgia?
Yeah. I did ceramics twice a week, rowing 3 times a week, and then in the beginning, I also did a cooking class because, of course, you need to learn how to cook. Or I love food, so I really wanted to learn how to cook. Ceramics was really important to me because I had like always planned on taking AP Studio Art my senior year, and so it like kind of just went really well into like the trajectory that I wanted to move in. I would also say that like the ceramic studio I was a part of was mostly like older women. And so like it was really fun to just like it's like a very different kind of Spanish that like older people speak than younger people speak, and so that was interesting. And they just made me feel very special, and they like always bring me little like food and snacks and stuff like that. And then I learned to row in Spanish, which was like very interesting. A lot of fun. There was also a lot of like shenanigans unrelated to rowing, and it was a good time for me to like meet people my age too. I would also say something that's like unique, I guess, or like a cultural observation I had is that a lot of sports teams, at least in Spain, have a wider range of ages. So like on my rowing team, there were like 12-year-olds, and then there are also like people like me that were like 17 and 18. And so it was like really fun to just like feel younger and like play dodgeball with the kids. And then I also did learn how to row, which was like kind of shocking because I don't have great balance, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's a great. I did see a question pop up about sports and how that works. So I'm glad you explained that. But basically, at all of our campuses, we have the extracurricular coordinator who will lay out options for you of sports in your country. We also have a page on our website about this, and then it's up to our students to go and sometimes try out for the correct level of the sport. That works for them. So we sometimes have competitive athletes come and try out for a sport that they want to continue to play at a higher level. And then we have students who want to try a new sport for the first time, but it's through orientation and our extracurricular coordinator that our students get connected with local opportunities to play those sports. Okay, Julie, how about your activities?
So, like Georgia, I also did a cooking class with a local, really old, really sweet French lady named Madame Palicot, and she's awesome, and I miss her every day. But my main extracurricular was music. So I, through my host family, found a piano teacher. And it was crazy to sort of learn piano, which was an instrument I spent years and years and years with in a whole new language and learning it sort of all over again. And then I also joined the local conservatory, the local youth orchestra. And I had a concert with them in December, which sort of ended my semester, which was a really nice extracurricular to have. With a lot of kids who were also my age and younger as well, and older. It was just a nice sort of way where we didn't have to speak all the time, but we spoke like sometimes, and it was a nice way to get used to speaking the language.
I think that's so cool and such a great opportunity to continue something that you have loved to do and then also learn the niche vocabulary that comes with learning how to play an instrument in a new language. So I think that's awesome and a great way to connect with local folks as well. So I'm going back to you, Julie, about your favorite food in France.
That has to be the galette, which is like a savory crepe, and I know everyone would say that went to France. And I had it every night, every Wednesday night with my host family. We would make galettes, and every time I went out with my friends at restaurants, 50% of the time it would be to get galettes, because they're just so good. Yeah, I think that would be my favorite one.
Awesome. So we're moving on to our category of trips. So I know in the presentation we talked about the school organized trips. So I'd love to hear a little bit from Francesca and then Georgia about your favorite trip with SYA.
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite trip, as Maggie was saying, there are both trips with the school as well as independent travel, which I think is super unique to SYA. It's a great experience. But my favorite trip that we did together as a school was to Sicily. That was our kind of end of year trip in the spring. We went down south and we went to a bunch of the major cities in Sicily together. And it was a great experience. The culture also is so different in different parts of Italy, as I'm sure it is in Spain as France as well. So just being able to really go to somewhere new, but in the same country, and make a lot of memories together is kind of like a big last hurrah. It was really special. My favorite independent travel trip was to Venice. So in Italy, there is a holiday called Carnevale, which is it happens in the spring, and it is basically like a huge party. If you've ever seen the masquerade parties, that's kind of the vibe there. And so we went to Venice together. We took a train, and it was basically we just went for it was like a long weekend, but it was so much fun. I was with my friends. We got to see how Italians celebrated holidays. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Just before Georgia chimes in, a little bit about our independent travel is that students have to earn that privilege with SYA. So it happens after at least a few months that students have been studying with us and studying the language. In order to travel independently, students are in groups of 2 to 4 students at SYA, and they are planning a really detailed itinerary that the resident director has to approve, and then the folks that are students home in the US will also have to approve. So there are lots of key stakeholders involved in approving this itinerary. And then there will be check-in points that our students have to report to our resident directors or heads of campus about where they are and how the trip's going and everything like that. So it's a pretty detailed process, but it's a really incredible opportunity for our students to showcase their independence and responsibility and also plan a really detailed trip. So we do trust our students with that, and it is something that makes SYA very unique, and some of the greatest memories at SYA come from those awesome trips. Georgia, how about you?
I would say that my favorite trip was basically, in the first semester, we had this really awesome experiential Spanish teacher leave because he got a job working at a public school in the south of Spain, and we really missed him. And so we're like, okay, we have to go visit him. And so it was basically going to be like a little exchange program where we would go shadow at the school that he was like now teaching at, because I have to say that I think that something that's unique about the SYA experience is the connections that you have to your teachers. I would say that like the closest I've ever been to my teachers was at SYA, and it was like kind of like a family, right? Because it's like that's where you spend so much of your time. And so we all missed our teacher a lot. He missed us, and we're like, okay, this is a great opportunity. And so we went to this really small coastal town in kind of like the south of Spain called Carboneras, and it was like the resident director and then 10 of us SYers, and it was a really like interesting experience just because it was like such a small removed town that a lot of the people there had never met Americans before. And I think that something that's interesting about the SYA experience is that it's like understanding your own Americanness. I think it helps you understand your identity. And so like meeting kids, they're like, oh my gosh, is it like the movies? And I'm like, my school doesn't have a football team. So I think it's kind of just like there's a lot of different I don't know, it was really insightful and also lovely because there was great weather there, and it was a really fun time just like be with people from school and then also to see this like old teacher that we had all missed. Yeah.
That's awesome. I definitely hear that from a lot of alumni who I speak with about just the relationship you create with teachers in such a small community. And you're going through a really unique experience and learning a new language and living with your host family and everything like that. So I think it's a really unique experience to bond over. And our teachers are very invested in our students and how they're doing and everything like that. Speaking of host families, I'm going to go back to Georgia to hear a little bit about your host family and maybe a little bit about the placement process from what you remember.
Yeah, sorry, the mute button wasn't working for a second. I had a really big host family. I had 4 host siblings, 2 sets of twins, which was really exciting. Both of them were younger than me. Like both sets were younger than me. And then I had a host mom, a host dad, and a host dog. So that's like 7 other members of the family. I would say that I was probably closest to my host mom because like she was just someone that was always there for me every day. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so ready to come home and get a hug from her. Getting paired with my host family, I think it all started with like a little like survey that we had to fill out. And I would say when you apply to SYA, which you should do, afterwards when you get in, you get to fill out this survey that's like asking a lot of questions about like, do you like to be by yourself more? Are you more introverted or extroverted? How do you feel about having a pet? And all those kinds of things. I was like very authentic and honest because I was like, this is going to be 9 months of my life and I would really like to be with people that I get along with. And I would say that I had a great relationship with my host family. And I definitely think that SYA did a really good job like matching me with them because my host brothers really love soccer and I'm like a former soccer player. So like whenever the Champions League game was on, like we would all like sit around the TV and just like do that instead of eating dinner, which we probably should have done, but it's okay. And then like I also had a host sister that was my age, basically my age, and so it was nice because like at home I only have a brother, but there I got to like experience having a sister. Yeah, and I would just say that like my favorite memory, or like one of my favorite memories with my host family, was like my host grandparents' anniversary party. So of course, being in Spain, we started lunch at 3:00. I was a little bit hungry, but it was okay. Lunch went from 3 to 6, and then we like all kind of walked home from this really nice lunch. And then from like 8 until 11, we were just like having a party in the living room. Like they brought out this disco ball I'd never seen before. And everyone in the family was dancing. So it was like 30 people in our living room just having a great time. And I really feel like that was like a lovely thing about being in Spain, was people really know how to live and like have fun and enjoy life. And it was like really special to be like welcomed into their family at that moment.
Thank you for sharing that, Georgia. I think that's a great story. And it really goes to show how included our students are. I think we get that question a lot of, how involved am I going to be with my host family? And obviously there's a range, but all of our host families want to have, a host child in their house, and they want to include them. So whether it's a family party, if your host family is going, you are going, or host family dinner every night, you got to be there. You are part of the family for the time that you're there. And I think I hear that from students and host families too, that relationship is really like having a second home often, and having a family who really is looking out for you and caring for you. And we take that process on the front end of the matching process and vetting our host family's background checks, at-home interviews, and then our host family coordinators maintaining a strong relationship with our families and continuing to check in with our students really makes this a strong program for the host family part. And we have a great bunch of dedicated host families on each campus. So I think it tends to be something that often students, it's one of the first things they think of when they think of SYA. So that's a great story. Thank you, Georgia. So now on to fieldwork activities. So as I mentioned, about once a week on our campuses, we have a day dedicated to getting outside the classroom for one of your classes. So Julie, could you share a little bit about fieldwork, and then I'll turn to Francesca.
Yeah, so we had one pretty much every week. Sometimes it was in the town. My favorite in the beginning was probably just getting a map. They took our phones and we had to find a bunch of places. And I think every campus goes through this. And it was very difficult, but it really gives you that first push, because you have to ask people near you for directions in the target language. And there was this really random, really nice French lady that just like brought us into the metro, taught us how to use it, and like we found our way around. And then as it goes on, you learn sort of more and more about not just your city, but also the rest of the country. So one really big one for France is Le Mont Saint-Michel, where we went twice. And if you ever see a picture with a big like mud and people walking in the mud towards a big castle, that's that one. And the second time you go more to appreciate the art history and the history of all of that, political science. So yeah.
Great ones. Yeah, definitely encourage folks to go to our website. We have awesome videos that are dedicated to each campus, and you'll see that field work in our videos as well. Francesca, how about you?
Yeah, so field work for Italy happened every Wednesday. So it's like field work Wednesdays. And I am personally a very hands-on learner. Like, it is so helpful to me to see what I am learning and really practice it and understand its implications and what it means in the real world, not just in a textbook, which I think is something really special about SYA. But I also, so my favorite fieldwork activity that I did was, so sometimes, like Julie said, we would stay in the town and sometimes we would leave. So for example, one Wednesday we went to Arezzo, which is a beautiful little town. And our field work for a class called agroecology, which is a food science class, we did like a cheese sample. So we went around to different cheese stores and we tried different types of cheese that are made in different ways. And that was just so much fun. It was like, we felt like we were on a treasure hunt looking for this one specific type of cheese. And then also when we weren't doing these kinds of activities, it was mostly in Rome. We would go to Rome. And one of the really cool things about Viterbo is that it is a small town. So you know everybody and everyone knows you. So you get that intimacy, but you're also about an hour train ride away from Rome. So every Wednesday we would go and we would do field work there, whether it be in the Roman Forum or doing interviews on the street. And also just to echo again what Julie was saying is that so many locals love to help, especially in Viterbo, especially in Rome. If you try to talk to them, if you need help, if you need directions, I had to ask how to find a taxi once. Everybody's just super friendly, super willing to help out. It's a great community.
Great. Thank you so much, Francesca. Kind of the culmination academically for our students is the capstone project, where they get to pick a subject in their experiential language class, which is a little bit more based in culture and based in kind of the hands-on field work elements of our program, and dive into a subject that is interesting to them. So Georgia, can you tell us a little bit about what you did your capstone on, please?
Yeah. So I did my capstone on this like government service and organization in Zaragoza called La Casa de la Mujer, which translates to the woman's house. And so I've always been like very geared towards gender studies, like in all of my, like I've always just like, it's like women in sports, women in Turkey, women in Mexico. I'm always like curious to learn about that. And so it was like really special for me to see this like organization that the government funded in Zaragoza, meant to support women in every way that they could. And I would say that like the capstone project is a pretty big project because you start in, I think, around March, and it's presented in May, about a week before you leave. And so it's just like there's a lot of build up to it. The first part of it was like picking your topic, right? But then getting in contact with experts, which is just really scary because it's like, oh my goodness, this person like really knows what they're talking about, and I need to communicate with them in Spanish or in whatever language, like in whatever target language it might be. And so for me, I was like writing these emails and I was like, oh no, like what if they can tell that I'm like, I don't know everything. But I think that that's like kind of the beauty of SYA, is like learning that it's okay to make mistakes, that like learning a language is very difficult, and that people are just very accepting, because it's like they can see that you're like trying so hard. But anyway, back to capstone. So it was on the woman's house, and basically through my host mom, I was able to contact a woman that worked there. And so one day, like I came prepared with a lot of questions, and so basically I got to like go to the woman's house itself, which is like kind of like in the old town. And the first floor is this gallery that presents like a lot of women's artwork, especially like women who have been victims of gender-based violence. So it's like kind of their artistic outlook, or like, yeah, the way that they can like kind of understand what happened to them. And then on the other levels, there's like lawyers that can help people. There's like, I also think there was like just like general like social workers that can help women navigate whatever they need to do. And another thing that I thought was super interesting was that there were kind of like different workshop leaders that could help women learn skills that women often aren't usually taught. So like if you wanted to learn like mechanical engineering, like they would help you find that if like that was a field of study you wanted to go into. And the way that capstone worked, at least in Spain, was that like you had a presentation and a portfolio. So we documented like the whole process through pictures, and we learned a lot about like what makes a good picture or what makes a picture tell a story. And then also the presentation was about 10 minutes speaking in Spanish in front of your whole grade and your whole class, and then also like all the teachers. And I was the last person to present my capstone project, so I was a little bit nervous because I'd seen everyone do such a wonderful job. But ultimately I feel like the capstone presentation just makes you feel very proud of yourself, because it's like, oh my goodness, look at how far I've come kind of thing. And so yeah, it was really wonderful just to like have that experience of like learning about something I was super interested in and then sharing that with my classmates.
That is an amazing project and clearly really influential. And so it's just so exciting for me to hear about all the different and like the range of projects. And that at the end of the time at SYA that students can get up in front of their classmates and present in the target language is really incredible. So we have 2 questions in our panel, and I'm seeing the questions roll in the chat, which is great. We will get to them in a couple of minutes. So I do have some questions about like transportation and getting around the city. So Francesca, if you could talk a little bit about that in your kind of day in the life summary. You don't need to tell us about every class you took, but just kind of generally from when you woke up to when you were back at your host family's house for dinner, kind of the steps that you took in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically, a typical day for me looked like, so I lived a little bit outside of the walls of Viterbo. For those of you who don't know, Viterbo is a medieval city, which means that, amongst other things, it has a big stone wall that encircles it, and that's kind of the main town. And I lived a little outside, about a 5-minute drive and maybe a 20-minute walk. And so basically, when I would wake up, I would go downstairs. I'd have breakfast. My host family, they weren't that big on breakfast. But I asked them, the first couple of weeks, I asked them if I could keep yogurts in the fridge. And then they said, don't even worry about it. We'll buy it for you. So then they started going out, and it was actually really sweet. They paid really close attention to what types I liked. So they knew that I only liked the vanilla and I did not like the fruit. So that was a really sweet little moment. So every morning I would have my yogurt, my vanilla yogurt. And then my host dad would drive myself and my host sisters into town. They all went to school in the city center as well. So he would just drop us off and then we would walk. So that was really convenient. Then I would go to school. I'd have a couple classes. And then we had a break for coffee, which is very important in Italian culture. There's a little coffee break midday. And then we would have lunch. And basically for lunch options in Italy, not sure about other campuses, but in Italy at least, you can either go to a cafeteria, that's where the food is included in your tuition, or you could go out into the town. And there were tons of options just even around the school. There was pizza, there was, something quick, and there was also a sit-down restaurant if you had a little more time. So that was a great option to have, to be able to choose. And then, so a couple times a day, I would have a free period, which was just to get work done, or to, go grab a snack. And then I would do my extracurricular activities like I talked about before. And then I would usually take the bus home. So the way that the bus works in Viterbo is there are a couple lines, so you have to kind of know which one is which. And then basically I would just take the bus from city center, and it dropped me off like less than a minute from my house. So that was very convenient. I know a lot of other people did that as well, take advantage of that bus system. And then I would do homework, I'd study if I had to. And then, as we were saying earlier, family dinner was very important. So we'd all go downstairs. They always had like a soccer game on, or some type of, my host sisters really liked The Voice and those kind of shows. So we would always watch those at dinner. And then after that, I would go upstairs, finish my homework, and go to sleep. And that was about it.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know we did have a question about commuting and transportation. And basically, all of our families are picked within a reasonable commuting distance from our school. But the way that students get to school is different depending on the family. So sometimes we'll have a host parent who is able to drive our students in. Often the students will be utilizing public transportation. During orientation, we work with our students to make sure they're comfortable, they know the routes. The host family will also help with that to make sure the students get practice with adults and kind of work on that until they're comfortable. And then some students get to walk. So it does run the gamut, but we do work with our students to feel comfortable. And I think it can be really empowering for our students to know a public transportation system. These cities are not too big. So the public transportation is incredible in all three places. So a reason that we chose these beautiful cities. So our students do rely on those methods to get to school. I did also see another question about the language component to our program and how much language all of you had coming into our SYA experience, but also if host families speak English. And this is a question that we get a lot. Basically, the short answer is no. Host families do not necessarily speak English. And even if they do, we really encourage them not to. And I know that may sound really intimidating. And our students learn so much faster when they're fully immersed and don't have the option to go into English. And we know all of our host families so well, and the host families know that our students don't speak in the target language completely before they come. Most of them don't. So they're fully aware of this, of the kind of nature of the program and where our students enter in, and are really actually excited to work with students through those fumbles and the mistakes in the beginning. But do any of you want to talk a little bit about how were you in the language before? Julie, you can take this one. And also just, and then Francesca, because I do think it is something we hear from students that it's really scary to jump into immersion, and how you kind of work through that or advice that you'd have for those students. So Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, so going in, I had a fair amount of textbook French, but you learn very quickly when you get there that textbook target language is very different from spoken target language. And to be very honest, the first week I couldn't understand my host family very well because they spoke very fast, especially my host sisters spoke very fast. But I think, to be honest, the host family is really where you learn the most language because, yes, your classes are in French, and yes, you speak French with your friends and other kids your age at your extracurriculars, but your host family is really fully immersed and they speak at a native level about so many different things. So I'd say that's really where I learned the most French. And I think also everyone comes in with a different level, but I think about at the 1 month mark, we were all able to communicate sufficiently with each other and with our host families to an extent. Of course, some people come in with less or more knowledge, but I think we were all at an even level at some point. And I know since then, when I got back after my semester, I was placed into AP French and I took that exam. And actually, this past Wednesday, I took the DELF exam, which is a French fluency exam. And I think it went pretty well. So yeah, you really do learn a lot with your host family.
I'm so glad you brought those two things up. I think first thing is host family environment, and second thing is the AP, which I'll get to in a second. But the host family environment can be such an impactful way to learn a language because it's communicative, it's fast, and it's also really, our students end up being very comfortable in their host families and they can make mistakes without really thinking twice about it. Or you can talk to your host sibling without it feeling like really high stakes or that you have to raise your hand in a class. And that kind of relaxed environment and an environment where you can absorb so much can really create this incredible learning experience where students just don't feel as intimidated to push themselves in the target language. And so I think it can be really, really incredible. And then the AP, so most of our students do end up taking the AP in the language when they return from their SYA experience, or at the end of their SYA experience, I should say, and do fairly well. So it's a very common thing. While we're not offering the AP language course, that with so much exposure, our students tend to follow through and do well. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. Francesca, do you want to share a little bit about your language experience?
Yeah, so going to Italy, I had a very different experience going into it. So I guess kind of the opposite of Julie, I didn't know any Italian, which is how I think most, if not all, people going to SYA Italy begin with. So I knew very basic, hello, how are you, probably. But I think in the first couple weeks, starting from nothing, it's incredible how much we all learn together. And that's a lot to do with both the host family and the school. So for the host family side of it, like we were saying before, they are the first people to ask you to make mistakes. They just want you to talk and they want you to try. And when you inevitably mess up, because you will about a million times, a lot of the times it ends up being a really special moment with your family where you're all laughing together. I remember that my first couple weeks, I could not remember how to say washing machine. And I made some word up that didn't mean anything. And I said it every time and they corrected me every time. And every time it was just like giggles all over at the dinner table. And it would go on for a really long time. And then even throughout the rest of the year, it was a joke. If I was ever saying like, I'm going to go, get my laundry from the washing machine, they would be like, oh, the lavoratrice. And it was like, so it was really sweet. And it turned, something that might've been embarrassing into something that was actually really, kind of just emotional with my host family, emotional connection. And then I also will say that the teachers at SYA are incredible. Like we were saying before, the bond you have with your teachers is very, very close and it's very special. For example, so SYA Italy, we had Professor Tutsi, who she was our Italian teacher, and basically her classes were just the most fun. And she taught us so much, and she made it all, and it came to us in a way that didn't feel unnatural. And it was like everything we learned, we were able to put into practice with our host families, with our street interviews, and just kind of having her as unwavering support always in our language learning was very, very important.
That's great. Thank you so much, Francesca. We do have a question about, can you take SATs abroad? Yes, all of our campuses are SAT testing sites, so that's definitely an option. I also saw a question roll in about the semester versus the year. So this is a question that we get a lot about students currently weighing out the pros and cons of, do I go for a semester and do I go for a year? So again, to reiterate, most of our students do attend for the year. So about 40 to 45 of about 50 to 65. So it is the majority. But I'm happy to turn it over to Georgia just to talk a little bit about what you might tell a student who is considering maybe both, and kind of a little bit about your experience deciding.
Yeah, so I did the year-long program, and I would say that I urge everyone to really do the year-long program. I think that it's just like the first semester is difficult because you're really becoming immersed in the language. You're figuring out what you want to do every day. I would say like the first month for me, at least my head hurt at the end of every day because I was like, so much Spanish going on here. Of course, it was a lot of fun, but I was like, this is tiring. And then I would say that also just like it to me, I perceived it as being potentially disruptive to go back to school in the middle of the school year. I had 2 girls at my school who only went for the fall semester and came back and they're like, "The transition's fine." So, I don't think that there would actually be a problem, but for me, I really wanted to make the most of my time there. I'd also say that there's, like, a lot more opportunity to try a lot of different things. So, the rowing that I did in the spring semester, and that was, like, once I was like, "Okay, I feel like I can interact with people my age now because my Spanish is good enough." Not that that should ever like hold you back, but I wanted to be more confident. I would also say that it like made me a lot closer with my host family because I ended up spending the holidays with them too. I know a lot of people do different things around the holidays, but my family came, and so like I got to spend Christmas Eve with my host family and my parents and my and my brother too, and so that was just like a really sweet like wholesome moment. But yeah, I'm still in touch with my host family today. And so it's just like I think that in like it just like helps you make the most of like even more of the SYA experience because there's just like that much more time. I also know that a couple of my friends were originally going to only do a semester and then ended up doing year long. And I would highly, highly, highly advise that. I do know that like if you have like a spring sport that's really important to you, like rowing, I don't know, then of course if that's like your main goal, then you should prioritize that. But I will say that there's like always athletic opportunities wherever you go because they have sports at like every level. At least they did in Spain. And like, I don't think, I think that there's so many more reasons to just stay longer because it's just so much fun. You get to be with your friends longer. And I think you also like get a lot more comfortable with the language just because it's more casual. And you just get to spend more time with your host family. Yeah.
All great pros. Thank you so much, Georgia. Julie, do you want to chime in?
Just as someone who did a semester, I really, really wished I had stayed the whole year. And when I applied, it was because of parents or because of a financial reason. And it's a good thing that the semester option exists because it was better financially for me and my family, and that's how it worked out. But when the fall semester was over, I was heartbroken that most of my friends were all staying and having the time of their lives for the rest of the year. And I wasn't there anymore. So I would really, if you're considering doing the year, do the year because it's really valuable to do the whole year.
Thank you, Julie, for sharing. I do want to note too that if you go for the fall semester and you decide you want to stay, you cannot decide that you want to stay while you're there just for visa and host family purposes. So this is definitely something to consider now. If you're on the fence, to really start considering what the year might look like. And I think that it is really interesting to talk to students who have done both the fall and the spring. I think each have their pros and cons, and an SYA experience is definitely better than no SYA experience. but it is definitely considering the year and kind of considering what Georgia is talking about after a month, maybe you're just starting to feel comfortable and like, okay, now I can start to think about some other things other than full language immersion all the time. And I think it's the second semester where we see often the language growth grow a lot in the relationship building. Not that that can happen in a semester, but the second semester can be extremely valuable for those opportunities. So thank you both for sharing about that. Georgia, I know that you mentioned that you stayed at the campus for our winter break, and we did have a question about vacations and breaks. So on our website, you can see our actual calendars for this year, which are similar each year. But yes, we have breaks built in. They're different for each campus, so please go online to check those out. I will just note that our host families are fully prepared to host our student through all the breaks. That's a concern of, oh, do I have to go back to the United States? No, we actually encourage all of our students to stay abroad the entire time that they're with us. There can be exceptions if a student needs to come home or wants to for some reason, but we do encourage students to stay fully immersed and to not kind of break that immersion and everything like that. It's often the breaks are a great time for families to come visit the SYA campuses. That can be a really wonderful experience. But if families cannot do that, no worries at all. Our host families are prepared to host, and it can be just a really incredible time to be with your host family and go through those kind of traditions with them. So our host families are prepared to do that for the whole year. So I know we have a couple more questions, but one I definitely want to make sure we get to is kind of that ending. What made you apply to SYA? Like, what was it that spoke to you? Or even what is it now that you'd encourage others to really consider? So if we can go to Georgia and then Julie and then Francesca, and we'll hear from all of you on this one.
I think I've always been interested in studying abroad just because my dad studied abroad in college, and so it was always something that I was curious about. And then at my school, they did like the video, which is very inspirational, I must say. You should go watch the video. They did the video presentation at like an all-school meeting, and I was like, I have to do this. But I was also like, this is really terrifying, and I don't know if I can do this. And I would just like to say that SYA made me realize how brave of a person I was. And I think that like a lot of people like, you have it within you. You can do it. I think it's also just like, I mean, again, like the art history thing, like seeing things in person, but I think it's all just like about the immersion. I was really excited to meet my host family. I wanted to have that kind of connection. And I think it's also just like about exploration and like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. I think that today there's like a lot of pressure to like kind of have this very specific like high school experience where like you take your APs, you take your honor classes, you do really well, you go to like a really, I don't know, selective college. And I think that SYA was like a really nice reality check that kind of puts everything into perspective. My host family lives a very different life than my family at home. And so I think it was really important for me to see that like difference. I would also just say that I don't think that SYA impacts college in a negative way at all. In fact, I think that it actually like supports your, I don't know, your portfolio better if you want to look at it like that. So I wouldn't let that be a reason to stop you. And that was like something my parents were concerned about, but it's all fine. But yeah, I would just say my dad did it. I was like, this sounds really cool. I should do this. And I think it says this in the video, and I think this is very true. If you're thinking about it, you should definitely do it. Like if it is something that has crossed your mind, it is probably for you, and you would definitely have a really wonderful time.
Thank you, Georgia. Julie, how about you?
So yeah, I was very similar to Georgia, actually. I really wanted to study abroad at some point in my life, and I always thought it would be during college because I wasn't going to be ready before that. But then at an all-school meeting, they put on the video, and they talked about it for a little bit, and I realized, oh, this is something I could do now. And I really wanted a change of pace in my life at the time. I really wanted to sort of escape the bubble that my school community, that my city, that my area is sort of entrapped in. And I am a completely different person than than before SYA. Like I couldn't, like if I met myself before SYA now, I'd be like, oh my gosh, she's so lame. Like there's just so much that you learn not just about the language, not just about school, not just about art history or whatever, just about yourself and about you as a person. And you grow so much through doing this, even though it's scary in the beginning. And I think I know that this is said either in the video or somewhere on the website that like it's the greatest decision they've ever made. Like I am in 100% agree with that. Like this was the best decision I ever made for myself.
Thank you, Julie. I love just thinking about your pre-SYA self, meaning your post-SYA self. I've never heard that before, and it's just such a sweet and impactful way to think about just how much change happened in that year, and kind of just like what Georgia was saying, like how brave you really are. I think just showing yourself that's just an incredible life experience, and will only make you more prepared for the future. Francesca, how about you? What was it that made you apply, or advice you have for those watching?
Yeah, so I got this presentation, the famous presentation, when I was a freshman, so I was a little younger. And studying abroad previously had not been something that was, in my future. I did not think about it at all. I was very nervous. I wasn't sure if I would be able to do it. But then I realized after this presentation, even though at first my initial reaction was no, I can't, there was still a kind of like a spark of curiosity that made me want to learn more. And so I attended a panel like this. I looked on their website, looked at the campus reporter videos on YouTube. And then I kind of started realizing that you don't have to necessarily be, particularly special. Like there's no person that is perfect for SYA. Like you can be anyone who's willing to take a risk, and that makes SYA for you. Not being a certain way, not having a certain grade. It's the type of person you are and the type of person that you're willing to change into. And that for me was it was an important realization. And so I applied, and I will say starting your application early is very important. Takes a lot of the pressure off, so very much recommend doing that. And I just think that coming out of SYA, I am a much more open person. SYA is, like we were saying before, is a non-traditional way to spend a year. And so kind of just realizing that there is a life and experience outside of what everyone else does. That is completely special and totally unique in its own way. It makes you more open to taking risks, to exploring more paths, and chasing more sparks of curiosity. And I think that's just so important.
I love that, sparks of curiosity. Well, I think that is the perfect note to end this on. I know we have to head out. I know some of you have meetings to go to, and it's we just are so appreciative of the time that you've given to SYA. Thank you, Julie, Georgia, and Francesca. You're all incredible people, and I learned so much from you. And I really also thank all of you for joining tonight. Please follow us on our social medias. You can email me at mbland@sya.org. I put that in the chat. If you have any more specific questions, or we didn't get to your question, once again, the application is due February 9th, but please do start that now, and we look forward to reading it. But thank you all. Thank you to our alumni, and we hope you have a fantastic night.